Hello everyone, my name is Rick Jones. I'm going to be doing a series of video book reviews actually for a class I've been taking called Emerging Christianity in a Postmodern Culture. I'm going to be reviewing a few of the texts we read for that class, giving you kind of a overview of what's said in the book, and then a kind of a help for maybe what Lutherans specifically can take from the book, what we can learn from it, as I am being trained at a Lutheran institution right now to become a pastor. So that's kind of the context we're approaching this from. So anyway, the first text we have is Ancient Future Faith by Robert Webber, published in 1999 by Baker Books. What this book serves as is really an introduction to the emerging Christianity movement, not so much in necessarily what they do, but maybe the mindset with which this movement in Christianity is operating with. Excuse me. So a little background. What's making this all necessary is the shift that's happening in our culture. We're moving from a modern worldview to a postmodern worldview. And with that move comes a few key changes in the way people view and interact with society. The main thing comes down to a modern culture really believed in the ability of man to solve all problems, the ability of men to bring about a utopia. With enough knowledge, with enough technology, with enough know-how, man can solve all problems. We can cause things to disappear. We can cause disease to disappear. We can overcome different things in our society. Unfortunately, that has proved not to be the case. We still have disease, we still have suffering, we still have death, we still have social problems in our world. So the postmodern worldview is kind of a reaction to that whole mindset that man can fix the world. Postmodernism says that's a lie, that can't happen. We still have to deal with all these things that modernism says we were going to fix. It all started with the Enlightenment. That's where the modern worldview kind of emerged. And since then, we've kind of slowly been moving towards a postmodern worldview, and now we're kind of right in the middle of it, in the middle of that switch. And so what Robert Webber has done with this text is try to provide a framework through which we can communicate Christianity more effectively to a postmodern culture. How we can shift the way Christianity operates from a modern perspective to a postmodern perspective. And what he proposes as a solution, proposes as a way to bring the faith of Christianity to a postmodern culture, is to get back in touch with the classical idea of Christianity, that is the ancient church, and bringing it into the future, hence the name of the book. This one, he actually does a series of them. This one is about faith, so it's about the kind of the beliefs behind I guess emerging Christianity that seeks to take a postmodern worldview. He kind of breaks the text into a couple of categories. First, he talks about the classical Christianity, how it operated, what its main views on different key things were. Then he talks about Christ, he talks about the church, he talks about worship, he talks about spirituality, and he talks about the mission of the church. So, classical Christianity, what he thinks the solution is, how we need to go back to that, reestablish our roots. He sees this fundamental and beneficial because of the unity that's in the foundation of the faith that's evident in classical Christianity. They came up with the rule of faith. They came up with the different ecumenical creeds, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene creeds, things like that. He also sees the classical Christianity as inclusive versus exclusive. The church sought to love first, as opposed to exclude first. Love first, then instruct, as opposed to the other way around, inclusive versus exclusive. Then the view of Christ in classical Christianity. He sees a difference between the classical Christians, or ancient Christianity, had a very much Christus Victor theme. They saw Christ as a victorious person over sin, death, and the devil, always looking forward to the final culmination of all things, when Christ returns and establishes his reign once and for all. It will be a very real thing that we constantly look forward to and constantly work towards, whereas Weber sees the modern take on Christianity bringing the sacrifice of Christ to the forefront as opposed to the victory of Christ. One has trumped the other in how we communicate the faith. And he sees, if we go back to a Christus Victor model as opposed to just the sacrificial model, we can really communicate some of the ideas of postmodernity better. Then he goes to the church as an organization, as a network, as a connection of people. He thinks we need to get back to our historical connections. We have a lot of denominations, a lot of different church bodies currently, and they've all sprung up following different people and different ideas. And he thinks, well, some of those things are good, and it's nice to know kind of the heritage leading back towards some of those things. He thinks we need to go even further back and get back in touch with the ancient church, the classical Christianity, because of the way things operated there. They were much more incarnational in the way they viewed church. It was actually, church was a community of Christ in the world, not a place where people went to kind of worship and be godly, but they took that into the community with them. They were an incarnational church. Basically, we've made the church invisible with the priesthood of all believers, the way we execute that in our current society. Robert Weber believes that in the classical Christianity it was much more of a visible church. People could tell you were Christian by the way you acted, and that was something that was communicated very clearly at a community level in how people interacted with their society. He thinks we need to reestablish that. He also goes to worship, talks about the symbolic communication, symbolic language, the things that happen in worship being symbolic. Some churches still use vestments. This is part of that. It communicates in a way that we can't necessarily intellectualize in a concrete way. We know things mean something. Part of this that has gone away, excuse me, part of this has gone away is we try to make things so easily explained, and he thinks we need to get back to a symbolic communication rather than a concrete way of communicating. Incense representing our prayers or praise going up to God, using the different way God interacts with us, whether the sacraments and things like this, in a way that's not so much just an exercise in heady knowledge and intellect, but really more of something we interact with and don't worry about trying to explain in such concrete terms. Symbolic communication. Let the mystery of God come forward. He talks about spirituality. This actually deals a lot with the worship. A lot of mystery, going back to a mystery idea. Things don't have to be so blatant and concrete all the time. Embrace the supernatural. Let God be God and let Him interact with us the way He will. Going back to a baptismal, liturgical, and Eucharistic understanding of spirituality, where God has promised to be for us, that is where we seek to embrace Him. So in those different pieces. Basically, it's not, he wants to go to a spirituality of experience, not a spirituality of knowledge. And then finally his idea of mission, going back to classical Christianity, he sees it more as a process of incorporation rather than just instructing someone first and then bringing them into the community. You let them be a part of the community and they are incorporated into it as they are slowly instructed and brought into it as they're acclimated to the Christian community. He sees it more as that open kind of a process as opposed to an individualistic experience. Someone does something or has a specific personal experience and then they're a part of Christianity. Instead, he wants it to be a gradual process of bringing them into the church family. So that's kind of an overview of the book. Hope that's helpful. Now some things for Lutherans specifically. I think this book is actually good news for Lutherans. The idea of how can we interact with a postmodern culture, because we have a lot of these tools already built into our theological heritage. We've got great things such as we use liturgy, we use the Eucharist, we use baptism and all these sorts of pieces. They're there for us. We just maybe need to interact with them a little bit different, make them more about experience and less about knowledge. We have doctrines about sanctification, vocation, the priesthood of all believers. These are wonderful tools for getting back to that incarnational mission of the church, getting back to the idea of community and the visible church as opposed to only being an invisible church. So we have these things there. We just need to bring them out a little bit in a new light, maybe refocus them, get back to our roots, get back to our heritage in a sense that is actually experienced as opposed to just relying on going back to our Lutheran fathers, that is for a heritage of our intellect and our written theology, our system of thinking, actually going back to our roots as a way of the things we do, and not just to do them as rote repetition, but bringing them into our modern context or our current context as well, adapting things so they fit. That piece can't move either. We need to make sure things are contextual. We're not just adopting ancient forms verbatim. We're adopting them and adapting them to fit and communicate properly in our current context. And all these things that we do have, these tools we do have that could be largely beneficial, we're not getting rid of them and completely just redefining them. We're just, it's a new paradigm for which we can view them. Lutheran Church has a lot of these tools in place. Once again, it's just a matter of maybe adapting them to be more community-focused, and more focused on the person trying to deal with this life, as opposed to making our whole exercise in theology that heady knowledge, intellectual experience. We have to be careful that we're not allowing our rich theology in and of itself to become a kind of a works righteousness in a way of knowledge, not making our knowledge and our system a work in itself. It's not that system, it's not our beliefs that save us, it is Jesus that saves us. If we can get back to that kind of understanding and use these tools that are already built into our theological heritage, the Lutheran Church can be a wonderful place and have wonderfully strong tools with which to bring Christianity to even now our postmodern culture. And I think Ancient Future Faith by Robert Weber can give us kind of a reframing of our mindset on how to maybe do that better. So once again, the review we did today was Ancient Future Faith by Robert Weber. I thought it was a great book. I thought it could be immensely helpful. Hopefully you think so too. If not, that's fine. But I'd give it a read. I think it's definitely worth it. Thanks. Bye.